The Boeing 797 prototype stood gleaming under the hangar's bright lights, its sleek, futuristic design capturing every gaze. Martin Caldwell, Boeing's lead engineer, stood a few feet away, his arms folded, his expression carefully measured. After 2 years of relentless development, countless setbacks, and sleepless nights, the aircraft was finally ready to be unveiled to the board of directors. Yet, as he studied the plane, a pang of uncertainty gnawed at him. Could this really be the game-changer they promised? Behind him, the soft click of heels broke the silence. Sarah Mitchell, Boeing's recently appointed marketing director, approached, her clipboard tucked against her chest. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice laced with admiration. "The press is going to eat this up." Martin gave a terse nod. "Let's hope beauty is enough to distract from the cost overruns." Sarah arched a brow. "If it performs as expected, no one will care about the budget. They'll care about what it means for the future of aviation." Martin turned to her, his sharp blue eyes narrowing. "And if it doesn't?" She hesitated, her confidence faltering for a moment before she straightened her posture. "That's not an option, Martin. The 797 is our chance to prove we can still lead this industry." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Richard Hayes, Boeing's CEO, a man whose mere presence commanded attention. His tailored suit was as sharp as his gaze, and his deliberate stride suggested he had no patience for anything less than perfection. "Are we ready?" he asked, his tone clipped. "As ready as we'll ever be," Martin replied, though his voice carried a hint of reluctance. Richard's gaze shifted to the aircraft, and for a moment, even his stoic demeanor softened. "This is more than an airplane," he said, almost to himself. "This is redemption." Martin knew exactly what he meant. Boeing's reputation had taken a beating in recent years, delays, controversies, and the shadow of fierce competition from Airbus. The 797 wasn't just a plane, it was a statement. But statements were fragile things, easily shattered by missteps. As Richard and Sarah discussed the rollout strategy, Martin's thoughts drifted to the previous week's test flight. The data had been promising, fuel efficiency was as projected, noise reduction exceeded expectations, and the innovative blended wing design performed flawlessly. Still, something about the controls had felt off. He had raised the issue with his team, but no definitive cause had been found. The engineers had dismissed it as minor calibration issues. Martin wasn't so sure. "Martin!" Richard's voice snapped him back to the present. "Yes. I need you to address the board today. They trust you." Martin stiffened. He had spent his career in the trenches of engineering, not in front of corporate suits. "Wouldn't it be better if Sarah handled that?" "Sarah will cover the marketing angle," Richard said. "But when it comes to the plane itself, they need to hear from you. You're the architect of this vision." Reluctantly, Martin nodded. As the group began walking toward the conference room, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that he was being pulled into something larger than himself, something fraught with risk. The boardroom was a cavernous space, its walls adorned with photos of Boeing's greatest achievements. At the far end of the table sat the company's most influential figures, their expressions a mix of anticipation and skepticism. Martin's pulse quickened as he stepped into the room. Richard opened the meeting with his trademark authority, delivering a rousing speech about Boeing's legacy and the pivotal role of the 797. Sarah followed, seamlessly painting a vision of the plane's impact on the market and its appeal to both passengers and airlines. Then it was Martin's turn. He stood, gripping the edge of the podium, and took a deep breath. "The Boeing 797, he began, "isn't just an airplane. It's the culmination of decades of innovation, risk-taking, and a relentless pursuit of excellence." He detailed the technological advancements, the lightweight composite materials, the revolutionary wing design, the AI-powered systems. His words flowed, and as he spoke, he felt a spark of confidence return. But then, midway through his presentation, a hand shot up. It belonged to Henry Lawson, a veteran board member known for his piercing questions. "What about the cost overruns?" Lawson asked, his tone sharp. "And the rumors of unresolved software issues?" The room fell silent. Martin hesitated, glancing at Richard, who gave a barely perceptible nod. "Cost overruns are a challenge," Martin admitted, "but they're an investment in technology that will pay dividends in the long run. As for the software, we've identified a minor anomaly, but I assure you it will be resolved before the aircraft enters service." Lawson didn't look convinced, but he didn't press further. Martin continued, though the rhythm of his presentation had faltered. When he finally finished, polite applause filled the room, but the tension lingered. As the meeting adjourned, Richard approached Martin. "You handled that well," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. Martin ran a hand through his hair. "Did I?" "Lawson isn't wrong. We're not out of the woods yet. Which is why we need this rollout to be flawless," Richard said. "No mistakes, no surprises." Martin nodded, though a part of him wondered if that was even possible. As he exited the boardroom, he glanced back at the photos on the walls, the iconic jets that had defined Boeing's legacy. He couldn't help but wonder if the 797 would join them as a triumph or stand as a reminder of overreach. The following morning, Martin arrived at the test facility early, determined to personally oversee the final preparations. The hangar buzzed with activity as technicians and engineers swarmed around the aircraft. Despite the chaos, Martin's focus was razor-sharp. "Run another diagnostic on the flight control systems," he ordered. A young engineer named Ethan nodded and began typing furiously at his station. "It'll take about 20 minutes, Ethan said. Martin nodded, his gaze fixed on the 797. It was a marvel of engineering, no doubt, but every marvel had its weak points. As he waited for the results, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah, media tour scheduled for 3 p.m. "Be ready," he sighed, pocketing the phone. His attention returned to Ethan, who was frowning at his monitor. "What is it?" Martin asked, his tone edged with concern. "There's an irregularity in the autopilot calibration," Ethan said hesitantly. Martin's stomach sank. "How bad?" "It's subtle, but it could cause minor instability under certain conditions." "Define minor," Martin demanded. Ethan hesitated. "It's hard to say without more testing." Martin's jaw tightened. He couldn't risk pushing the plane into the spotlight with even a hint of instability. But with the media tour hours away and the board expecting perfection, he had little room to maneuver. "Run the tests again," he ordered. "And don't stop until you're certain." As Ethan nodded and got to work, Martin stepped away, his mind racing. The stakes were higher than ever, and the margin for error was non-existent. Whatever it took, the 797 had to succeed, not just for Boeing, but for everyone who had poured their lives into making it a reality. For now, though, all Martin could do was wait, and hope that the plane would live up to its promise. The media tour began promptly at 3 p.m., as planned. The hangar had been transformed into a stage for Boeing's next great unveiling. Rows of journalists, industry analysts, and airline executives sat in anticipation, their cameras and notebooks poised to capture history. The Boeing 797, illuminated by strategically placed spotlights, stood as the centerpiece of the event, its sleek form casting long shadows across the polished floor. Sarah Mitchell took the podium first, radiating the poise and confidence she had become known for. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice ringing clear and strong, "what you see behind me is not just an aircraft. It's a testament to innovation, to vision, and to the relentless pursuit of excellence that defines Boeing." The audience listened intently as she outlined the 797's design philosophy. She emphasized its ability to bridge the gap between long-haul wide-body jets and the smaller, narrow-body planes dominating shorter routes. For years, airlines have faced a dilemma: sacrificing efficiency for capacity or vice versa. With the 797, that dilemma is over. This is the future of mid-market aviation. The words were carefully chosen, calculated to inspire confidence. Yet, amidst the applause, Martin Caldwell stood at the edge of the room, arms crossed, his mind preoccupied. Ethan's earlier discovery of the autopilot irregularity still gnawed at him. The diagnostic tests were ongoing, but Martin couldn't ignore the possibility that something critical could emerge. Meanwhile, Richard Hayes was working the room. Moving with the precision of a seasoned executive, he mingled with airline CEOs and high-profile journalists, planting seeds of optimism. "This plane will change everything," he told one group. "It's a win-win for passengers and operators alike. Reduced operating costs, greater fuel efficiency, it's unmatched." One of the journalists, a seasoned aviation writer named Linda Carver, wasn't so easily swayed. "What about Airbus? Their A321XLR has already captured significant market interest. Why should airlines bet on a plane that's yet to prove itself?" Richard smiled, his demeanor unflappable. The A321XLR is a fine aircraft, but it's a one-note solution. The 797 isn't just a response, it's a revolution. It's designed for versatility, comfort, and sustainability, and that's what will set it apart. Linda jotted down his response but pressed further. And the production delays? Boeing hasn't had the smoothest track record in recent years. Richard's smile faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. Challenges are inevitable with innovation. What matters is how we overcome them, and I can assure you, Boeing has learned from the past. The 797 represents not just a new aircraft, but a new chapter for this company. The conversation was interrupted by Sarah's call for attention. Now, it's time for what you've all been waiting for, a closer look at the 797's capabilities. The lights dimmed, and a high-definition video began to play on the massive screens flanking the stage. The footage showcased the 797 in action, soaring above clouds, its engines whisper-quiet, its silhouette cutting through the sky with elegance. Computer-generated overlays highlighted its fuel efficiency, passenger-friendly cabin, and reduced environmental impact. The audience watched, enraptured, as the narrative painted the 797 as nothing less than the future of aviation. But even as the room filled with awe and approval, Martin's unease deepened. The results of the diagnostics had come in just moments before the presentation began, and they weren't reassuring. The autopilot issue, while not catastrophic, could potentially cause instability in specific weather conditions. It wasn't something the public, or the airlines, could know about, not yet. As the video concluded and the applause thundered, Martin was pulled aside by Ethan, whose pale face betrayed his anxiety. "We've pinpointed the issue," Ethan whispered. "It's in the software integration. It's not a hardware problem, but it's going to take time to fix." "How much time?" Martin asked, his voice low and urgent. "Weeks. Maybe more." Martin clenched his jaw, his eyes flicking toward the stage where Sarah was fielding questions from the audience. "This can't get out," he said firmly. "Not until we've solved it. Do you understand?" Ethan hesitated but nodded. Understood. The stakes were clear. If word of the issue leaked, it could devastate the 797's reputation before it even took flight. But withholding the information wasn't without its own risks. Martin was no stranger to the ethical dilemmas that came with his position, but this felt different. The weight of it pressed on him like never before. As the event continued, questions from the audience grew more pointed. A representative from a major airline raised concerns about pricing. "What's the return on investment for a plane like this? Fuel efficiency is great, but how does it translate to profitability?" Sarah answered with practiced ease. "The 797 is designed with cost efficiency at its core. Airlines can expect up to a 30% reduction in operating costs compared to older models, thanks to its fuel savings, lighter materials, and advanced systems. It's not just an investment, it's a game-changer for profitability." Her words earned nods of approval, but Martin knew the real test would come later, during the one-on-one meetings with airline executives. These were the deals that would make or break the 797's future. By the time the event concluded, the atmosphere was electric. Journalists hurried to file their stories, airline representatives lingered in hushed discussions, and Richard Hayes wore a look of quiet satisfaction. Yet, for Martin, the weight of the unresolved issue loomed heavy. As the crowd thinned, Sarah approached him. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Martin forced a smile. "Just the stress of the rollout. It went well, though." "It did," she agreed, her tone cautious. "But something's on your mind." For a moment, he considered confiding in her. Sarah was sharp, and her instincts were often spot-on. But he held back. "It's nothing that can't be handled," he said. She studied him for a moment before nodding. "All right. Just remember, this isn't on you alone. We're a team." Her words were meant to reassure, but they only deepened Martin's sense of isolation. As the lights in the hangar dimmed and the last of the guests departed, he stood alone, staring at the 797. It was a marvel, a triumph of engineering and design. But it was also a gamble, a high-stakes bet on the future of aviation, with the potential to redefine Boeing's legacy. The question that haunted him was simple: what if the gamble didn't pay off?